Here.
Councilmember Burt,
Here.
Councilmember Lithcott-Hames.
Here.
All present.
Thank you. So first we have an opportunity for members of the public to speak on any item that's not on the agenda but is within the purview of this committee. Do we have any members of the public to speak?
We do not have any requests for general public comment.
Oh.
I apologize. I thought these were from the Rail Committee meeting. We have 2 requests to speak. Our first speaker is John M.
Great.
I'll be sure. Okay, I'm John Melnichuk. I'm with Quiet Zones Palo Alto. Recently, we were thrilled that City Council passed and a vote to install quiet zones in Palo Alto. Now, the next question is funding. I'm hoping that the Finance Committee will have a chance to address this very quickly, move things along. We're not just complaining, we're really grateful for the action that's been taken. We've spoken with Senator Becker's office. We've spoken with Abby Koga's office, the supervisor for Santa Clara County, and we're looking for funding. So we're not just complaining, we're trying to help. And thank you very much.
Our next speaker is Melinda M.
Thank you again. Just a similar question. I don't understand how funding works on these things since we've gotten the City Council vote. And from what we understand, moving the quiet zones forward requires having funding in place. So I'm here at the Finance Committee hoping that we're not going to have a bottleneck or some kind of stalemate around the funding that we need to move this forward. I know there's delays around the Railway Commission and other things, but we need the money now so we can move from month 0 into completion. Thank you.
That concludes general public comment.
Thank you. So we will now move on to item 1, which is a recommendation that the City Council adopt a resolution approving the 2026 natural gas cost of service analysis and accompanying rate schedules. Alan?
Thank you. Alan Curtoy, Director of Utilities. Appreciate the time. I'm going to introduce Carla Daly, who is our Assistant Director of Resources. I will embarrass her a little bit. This is her last Finance Committee meeting after 34 dedicated years here at the City of Palo Alto. Every day is a party here. So we also have Lisa Belair, who is our Senior Resource Planner. She'll do the majority of the presentation. And I also wanted to acknowledge that we have UAC Commissioner Utsav Gupta, who is remote. He was on our subcommittee, and I wanted to thank him and the rest of the subcommittee members for their tireless time and effort working on this COSA. They spent at least 4 meetings and meeting with staff with additional hours doing so. So we do want to have some time if the chair would find that to his option to have him speak in that regard. So I'll pass it on to Lisa.
Excuse me, Alan. And through the chair, also wanted to let the committee know that we have Claire Collins of the Hanson Bridget Law Firm, our special counsel, also available. She's on Zoom.
And additionally, I also want to let you know we have our cost of service consultant, Amber Geschwind, on the line in case there are questions for her. And I also wanted to say that I believe Commissioner Gupta is available until 6. So I will try to expedite the presentation so that there's time. So this item is to seek the Finance Committee's recommendation for the City Council to approve the 2026 natural gas cost of service analysis report and adopt the revised gas rate schedules. These proposed rates are designed to ensure equity among rate classes and maintain compliance with cost of service principles And the rate adjustments are also consistent with the City Council's approved design principles for the gas cost of service study. So during the presentation, I'm going to give an overview of our stakeholder engagement, summarize the changes in the 2026 cost of service study relative to the current rates that are in effect that are primarily based on a 2020 cost of service study, and then talk about each of the council's approved design guidelines and how the study comports with those. So next slide, please. This slide lists all of the stakeholder engagement from when we went to the UAC, Finance Committee, and Council with the 2025 gas cost of service study, and then talks about the process that we went through subsequently to work with the UAC subcommittee, as Alan mentioned, and also to go to the City Council and ask for approval of the design principles for the gas cost of service study. Next slide, please. This slide summarizes the subcommittee meetings. We had an in-depth review with the UAC subcommittee and consistent with the direction from the Finance Committee and from the Council earlier this year. And next slide, please. In order to develop the cost of service report for 2026, the team did do a comprehensive update to all the costs and revenues, as well as the load information, usage information. And this slide tries to distill all of that complexity into 4 refinements or changes that I'd like to describe to you in the next 4 slides in detail. Next slide, please. So this first refinement ensures that the monthly service charge more accurately reflects customer-related costs by including the cost of every customer's meter and accounting for it in a comprehensive calculation of weighted average meter cost. This allows us to calculate the number of customers weighted by meter cost, which is used to split certain costs across customer classes. One of the main goals of the cost of service study is to split or allocate costs across customer classes. And as part of that process, the 2026 report looks at the gas utilities assets and allocates those across customer classes based on different parameters. And one of those key parameters is the number of customers weighted by meter cost. So this is an important change, and it is appropriate. The prior method relied on a representative meter that did not reflect the total service demands of different meter sizes as fully as this 2026 cost of service method does. And this update is one of the primary drivers of the rebalancing recommended in this report. The method that we're proposing is comprehensive. It takes into account the current costs of labor and materials for each customer's meter, and this update is necessary to refresh the gas utilities rates using the best available information and to reflect the latest costs so the rates remain fair and cost-based. The chart on the slide shows the current meter charges each month and the recommended meter charges. And you can see that those are increasing for the residential G1 class and also for the G3 large commercial class. They're both increasing and decreasing for different groups of the G2 customer class, which is commercial and multifamily master metered. And that leads into the next refinement, which, if we can go to the next slide, this recognizes the vast diversity of the customer meters and the capacity of the meters in the G2 customer class, and the consultant analyzed the usage information and found that the higher meter capacities do have higher average usage and require larger service lines and impose a greater demand on the system. And this analysis led to the recommendation to have 3 separate service charges for this customer class, representing that diversity of the meters. I wanted to point out that for the smallest group, the 1,136 customers in that smallest group, those meter capacities are similar to residential customers. We can go to the next slide, please. For refinement number 3, this is to update the average and excess method, which better aligns the rates with how the distribution system is designed. The average in excess refers to a way of splitting the gas system's assets into those that are related to average usage and those that are related to excess usage. And you see on the slide the words energy and demand. So in this study, average usage represents the amount of investment that's needed in order to serve customers that are using at the average level throughout the year. And then the excess represents the additional investment needed to serve customers that are using peak or excess levels, and we refer to that as the demand. This method leads to more costs being assigned to the residential customers because of their high peak usage. Next slide, please. So this is the fourth refinement, and it has to do with the way that the residential tier rates are designed. And this recommendation is to use the base and excess method, and that allocates costs between the tier 1 and the tier 2 rates. And you can see on the chart on the right that the light blue bars at the bottom, the energy related costs, those are spread across all units in tier 1 and tier 2. The base and excess refers to the method of how to split the demand-related costs that are assigned to G1 customers, residential customers. And those that are related to the base or average are in the light green, and those go across all of tier 1 and tier 2. And those costs that are related to the excess are assigned to tier 2. And you can see that the result of this is a 15% increase in the 15-cent increase in the tier 1 rate and a 23-cent increase in the tier 2 rate. Next slide, please. We also have a recommendation for an administrative change. There's no rate impact of making this change, but this is a recommendation to remove the cap for the cap and trade and transportation charges, which are pass-through charges that the city has no control over and must pay for. Next slide, please. This slide shows the bill impacts, and I'd like to draw your attention to the median residential customer on the bottom on the left. The impact of this study taken together at the median usage level for residential customers will increase the bill by 8% over a 12-month assumed period. And you can see also the non-residential bill impacts on the right. As I mentioned, they vary for the small, medium, and large groups on the commercial and multifamily master metered group, G2, and they're about 3% for the large commercial group. Next slide, please. So the next few slides, I'm going to go through the design principles that the council approved and talk about how the study addresses each of those. The first design principle is to make sure that the rates are based on the reasonable cost to serve customers, and that this is the overriding principle for the cost of service study. And that is indeed what the study does. We reviewed all the costs and applied an industry-accepted method to assign fixed and variable costs. The second design principle is to review all of the rate schedules. We did, in fact, review all of the rate schedules. As I mentioned earlier, we are recommending the change to the G2 meter charge. Additionally, we also looked at separating out multifamily from the residential class, and we also looked at separating out multifamily from the commercial in G2 and did not find a strong basis for splitting those groups out. Additionally, we looked at the G10 rate class, which is currently an entire rate class, but it only has one customer in it, and that is the city's compressed natural gas station at the Municipal Services Center. So what we're going to propose is to serve that customer through an interdepartmental transfer rather than a separate rate schedule. Next slide, please. The third principle is to closely look at the impact on low-income customers. And this chart shows that of the customers that we can identify as low-income who participate in the low-income programs, the average monthly usage is about 30 therms, and you can see that there is a spread in the usage levels, but most customers would see a bill impact of under $5 a month. And the cost to mitigate all the bill impacts on these low-income customers is about $30,000 per year. Next slide, please. Principle 4 is to determine the proper allocation of fixed and variable costs and how those can be implemented in various rate designs. And I covered the various methods that we're using to allocate fixed and variable costs above. We would be happy to answer any detailed questions you have about it. But for right now, I'm going to move on to the next principle. The fifth design principle is to review non-rate revenue sources that may be available for rate discounts or rebates. So this slide really outlines what those are in the gas utility. We have about $0.4 million of interest income available from fiscal year 2025. And there's $15 million available in the gas utilities cap and trade reserve. And on the right, you can see all the allowed uses of the gas cap and trade auction revenue that must be used for those particular purposes. And it outlines the City Council's policy on that topic. Next slide, please. This is our recommendation to approve the 2026 natural gas cost of service analysis report and the amended rate schedules, and repealing the rate schedule G10 that I mentioned about the compressed natural gas service. And with that, I'd be happy to try to answer any questions.
Thank you. And should we hear from Commissioner Gupta at this time? Great.
Members of the Finance Committee, thank you for your time tonight and for accommodating my schedule. I really appreciate it. I want to thank staff and the consultant for all their engagement on behalf of the UAC subcommittee that reviewed this issue in detail. As staff noted, we had several meetings over the last few months where some of us stayed an hour or more later, poring over and really understanding these Excel spreadsheets and what went into it. Staff was extremely generous with their time. Every question we had in this process was answered. So very thankful for that. And we think this is a good result, given the context and the numbers we had working with. First off, this report does much better at seeking transparency. It is a better and clearer report than the last one. The staff report provides a much clearer look at what the drivers were behind the cost increases. You can go through it, understand how certain changes affected the rates for each class, and I think we've accomplished a reasonable cost allocation here. One important note is when you control for the underlying data and the numbers that feed into the mechanisms of the COSA, the updated mechanics we have actually result in something that is more affordable for our residential customers than if one had just retained the old COSA mechanics and updated the numbers underlying that. And you can see that in the packet. I think it's a 2% cost decrease, just given the new mechanics in this COSA with the updated numbers. Also think it's great that we're no longer proposing to use green funds to subsidize gas service. So that's another great result of the process. Available for the next few minutes if any of the council members have any questions. But the UAC subcommittee and the UAC itself voted supporting this gas COSA onwards. Thank you.
Thank you. Colleagues, do we have any technical questions before hearing from the public? All right. Do we have members of the public who would like to speak?
We have one request to speak on item 1. Our first speaker is Hamilton H.
Okay. Thank you to the UAC Gas COSA Subcommittee and staff for your hard work and collaboration. The 2025 Gas COSA made discretionary accounting changes that significantly lowered the cost for small business, raised Tier 1 costs by a third, and financially discouraged electrification. The 2026 COSA improves upon this by better explaining these changes, distributing the cost more fairly between rate classes, and supporting a residential tiered structure that encourages electrification as was done in previous years. Staff should also show the fiscal year's total rate increase, not just the incremental change after this year's previous 5% increase. The overall revenue increase from gas utility payers remains 5% for fiscal year 2025 and 26. Residential median monthly bills will now increase 13% for fiscal year 25-26, down from the originally considered 22%. Small G2 customers will see their monthly fixed fees drop 83% from $170 to $29 per month based on updated data and new accounting methodology choices. Unfortunately, this strongly disincentivizes electrification. The city's rate-setting standard is reasonable cost, and I'd argue a fee higher than $29 is still reasonable. Since full electrification is one of Palo Alto's top climate goals, this steep reduction directly undermines that objective and could offset much of the progress made by the utility's other electrification programs. Meter costs were cited as a primary reason for the cost shift from small business to residents. However, this is based on the discretionary decision to add installation labor costs to the total meter cost instead of just doing the prior methodology of hardware only. As a result, the meter costs increased from $73 per resident in the 2020 COSA to $414 in the 2026 version. Staff and the city's legal team have been adamant about lack of transparency to prevent liability. This should be challenged for future COSAs to try and create a more open and transparent process for the public. Thank you for taking the substantial step in the right direction with the new 2026 gas COSA.
That concludes public comment on item 1.
Thank you. So returning to colleagues. Keith?
Yeah, thank you both to the subcommittee and the staff. I think this is a really good job. I'm quite happy with this. Can you go to slide 9? This is the pass-through chart, pass-through charges. So there's a limit right now. What would happen if we hit that limit? If we didn't change this?
But currently, if we hit the limit or we're close to the limit, we would bring that to council and request to increase the limit.
Because legally, then you'd have to actually absorb the
That's
cost.
right, yeah.
Okay.
And council member, to be clear, that actually did happen back when we had that spike in natural gas costs. The gas utility did have to absorb over $1 million, I think, because we had hit the limit.
Okay. And so we have no limit now. Whatever we get charged, we pass on.
So just to clarify, the limit on the commodity pass-through is still in place, and we are not recommending to remove that. And so if you'll recall, we council approved a hedging program where we're setting aside some money to deal with a price spike, but that isn't, there's 4 different charges that get passed through, and that one is not one that we're recommending removing the limit on.
Okay, thank you for that clarification. So we have cap and trade compliance pass through and transportation. So we're getting rid of the cap on those. And you mentioned the commodity. There still is a cap on that. And what's the 4th one?
The 4th one is the carbon neutral gas offset pass through, and that one has a very explicit council approved limit on how much money we can spend on per ton on offsets. And so it doesn't make sense to not have a cap there because it's really built into what council approved for that program.
Okay. But that's a pass through that we choose the amount of, right?
Correct. It's both a discretionary program that council has decided to implement, and there are parameters around that program that council approved. And so by definition of the program, that cost won't be higher than that. If we see offset costs getting high, we would come back to council and ask whether you want to continue the program, change the parameters, whatever the decision is. But yeah, that one's in our control completely as a city. And so we will leave that, propose leaving that cap on there. That is just part of what you approved.
So why do we have a cap on the commodity price? 'Cause it seems like if we have to pay for it, the
Yeah.
utility has to pay
Yeah.
someone else. Why would the customer just pass that through?
Yeah, I mean, I think if council wouldn't have approved the hedging program that we have in place, that we would be in a different position with respect to the commodity pass through. But since we do have a program in place around that, it does make sense to still have this cap. And then if the way that hedging program was approved, if the market price exceeds that cap, then we dip into that reserve that we're squirreling away money for in order to make up that difference.
Okay, so we're not buying futures or anything like that.
No.
We're hedging with just have a savings account that we will dip into.
Correct. That's
Okay.
correct.
Or maybe a reserve.
And, not to get into details of that, but it has a limited time and we will be coming back to council, reporting back on how much money we have and whether council wants to continue on or do something different or lower the cap. All those are possible future outcomes for the commodity charge.
Okay, thank you. Any follow-ups on that or? Okay, can you go to slide 10? Okay, so the median then is 17 and 51, right? That's so during the summer, the median person has 17 and 51 is the median. The tiers that we picked are 20 and 60. Is the median usage what drove those tiers, or was that coincidental that they're so close?
That is a great question. We looked at several different measures of the average to come up with the baseline levels that you're citing there. And so it's really an average measure that's being used, and that's consistent with how it was previously done as well.
Okay, I mean, that seems like a reasonable decision. That encourages people to stay below average and conserve. So, and then slide 14 talks about cap and trade money. And so I really like the idea that we're not using cap and trade to subsidize gas. What will we be using it for? That would be funding some of our electrification efforts.
Yeah, so cap and trade natural gas can be used for fuel switching. So we use that for a lot of our programs, such as our heat pump water heater programs and upcoming programs that will go to the SCAP committee. So we have those booked in for future uses. So we have a timeline to spend those monies, and we have staff that is actively monitoring that and has a proposed investment plan to fuel switch folks from natural gas to electric appliance.
Okay, and we're comfortable that we have enough programs installed that we'll be able to use that up in a timely manner?
And then some.
Okay, okay. We have a lot of programs. So we don't have to look for more programs. That's good. Okay, that's all I have. That was very good. And once again, I want to thank staff. Thank you for your patience and your diligence. I think we have a good result.
Julie?
I'll just add that as well. I know that we've been at this COSA question for a few meetings now and just really appreciate the thoroughness, staff's work and that of the UAC and specifically the UAC subcommittee. Thank you.
Yeah, I'll just echo that compared to the last time we did this and had a gazillion questions and UAC did, I think everybody feels that this has been real work well done and time well spent. And it's now, there's no perfect program that we could have selected, but this seems very solid and balances our different interests well. So I think we're ready for a motion.
I move the staff recommendation.
Second.
Okay. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. That passes unanimously. That was painless. Thank you. Well, the pain was that
Yes. We need.
Okay, we'll be moving on to item number 2, which is the general fund major tax revenue review and the retirement benefit funding policy update. Good evening, Lauren.
Good evening, Chair Lauren Lai and committee members. Lauren Lai, Chief Financial Officer for the city. Item before you is a major tax revenue update and retiree benefit policy update. First, I'd like to express my appreciation to the collective work, a lot of dedicated hours by Jesse Deschamps and Kayla Shapiro, our senior management analyst, and also to several others, Dan Matsuitz, senior consultant with TrueComp, Drew Ballard, who is the actuary who works for Foster & Foster. We've used them to update our reports to follow this issue. And you may recall Matt Bigger, who is the senior actuary with CalPERS. So all of them helped to create the data, the research that went into the recommendation tonight. So before we start, I'd like to just open that, I'll give you us a summary and then kind of unpack it at a summary level. We continue adapting to fiscal conditions for the coming fiscal years, anticipating tax revenues, especially sales tax, which we foresee will decline in fiscal 26, which is the current fiscal year, by approximately 20%. That's about $8 to $9 million. And that's due to a combination of one-time reductions and also lower tax allocations to the city on an ongoing basis. Our estimate for 27 and beyond indicates today that we anticipate about a $4 million loss, a decline from current projections. We're presenting to you a variety of budget balancing strategies for council consideration. Tonight, we will outline for you a multifaceted and multi-year budget balancing strategy. That'll include budget reductions for 26. It'll include exploring revenues and also, importantly, is service delivery efficiencies. We are charting a path forward for you as we continue to look at ways, especially to manage and reduce pension liability and pension costs. It also reinforces this very important policy, which we'll go into tonight, called the retiree benefit policy. Important in our financial stability is the preservation of our budget stabilization reserve, BSR. Our efforts will strive to maintain the 18.5% target level while we have a range of 15 to 20%. As mentioned, we are laying a path forward and introducing these different ideas and this multifaceted plan for you. There is no specific budget action tonight. This will come back to Finance Committee in 2 weeks when you'll see the long-range financial forecasts. We are going to incorporate some of these concepts into there so you can kind of see how it plays out. The long-range financial forecast goes to council then formally in January, and council will then provide direction and then adopt it, and that'll set the framework for budget development in 27. In addition, this piece of this will come back to council in the mid-year report in February because council authorizes any funds to be transferred from PARS to CalPERS. Last but not least, you'll see elements of this strategy play out again as we go and develop the budget for this upcoming fiscal year. The proposed budget will be published in April. So this outlines kind of the path forward for us, and you'll be seeing it at different intervals in the next 8 to 9 months. The report is dense. It's very technical. It was very founded. It was taken very seriously. But tonight's presentation will be brief. We have these experts available to answer any questions. I imagine you'll have some, but we just want to acknowledge it is a pretty dense report, especially the attachments. Okay, so with that, I'll go into the slides, and I'm happy to pause at any given time and walk you through. So above there on that timeline is the financial planning cycles and the conversations. Council adopted the budget in June. As you may recall, there was direction there on budget balancing. In September, before this Finance Committee, we presented you an update of the annual CalPERS valuation report. You may recall that's when the actuary had a great engaged conversation with the committee. Tonight, we're giving you an update on major tax revenues and also where we are with the retiree benefit funding update. And then it plays out the long range, the mid-year. And then in February through April, we have rate setting. In May, we'll bring back the proposed budget and do some robust study sessions with this committee. We'll adopt the budget in June. And then in October, we have what's called ALM update. CalPERS every 4 years does a asset liability management update where they look at their investment strategies and they look at also major assumptions in their whole practice and actuary and pension management. We align our pension policy review and update with that ALM update. So we are incorporating their study that's underway right now for you as a foundation for tonight's recommendation. We will come back in October to also make recommendations on the retiree benefit policy itself. But that update as to the policy is not tonight. We're just incorporating the ALM findings from staff. So in October, you'll see this come back to you under the title of ALM update and also a review of the retiree benefit policy. Okay, so kind of just showing how this all kind of ties together and how we'll see it at different intervals. All right, next slide, please. So overview tonight, we have about 18 slides, pretty brief. We'll first go over the general fund major tax revenues. Then we'll talk about the retiree benefit funding policy and also the recommendation. Staff recommendation is that the committee review and accept the general fund tax update, forward to the council with additional recommendations on transmitting or transferring funds from our pension trust to CalPERS and incorporate it in the long-range financial forecast. Next slide, please. So first, this is a summary of general fund major taxes. General fund major taxes represents about 65% of our general fund revenue. As you can see there, it encompasses and includes property tax, sales tax, TOT, which is transient occupancy tax, commonly known as hotel or room tax, UUT, which is our utilities users tax, business tax. We note there just briefly which ones of these are on track in terms of our forecast that it'll achieve the adopted budget number, which ones are at minor risk and which ones have significant risk. Our focus tonight is really to drill into the sales tax because that's where we are getting intel that there is major decline. As you can see there, there's also a pie chart that also shows the percentage summarization amongst the different taxes. Sales tax is the number 2 second source of taxation for us as a general fund, so it's fairly important. Next slide, please. So sales tax is declining. It's an evolving situation in 3 major areas, specifically consumer activities, right? It's very price sensitive, tariffs, just going through COVID, and interest rates itself. There's a lot of factors that drive consumer activity. Consumer activities basically is the basis of transactions and volumes and sales tax revenues to the city. Modernization is also impacting sales tax revenue and the allocation to the city, including online sales. Online sales is a major platform and it continues to increase. Online sales goes into what we call a pool, and CDTFA, which is the California Department of Tax, Fine and Fees Agency, regulates that and defines how those online sales come to the city. And that's evolved over the years with Amazon and Wayfair, etc. Last but not least, CDTFA also continues to adopt and implement new regulations around the interpretation of sales tax. Even though the governing regulations haven't changed, they are the empowered authority to interpret, implement, and regulate the allocation revenues to the city. And so those are some of the factors that are the basis for the drivers for our allocations to the city. What's happened in the last 12 months in particular, you'll note in your Q2 report that was published recently, there are 2 economic sectors that are experiencing notable declines. What we call business to business, inside business to business, is the leasing sector. That's decreased 41.6%. That sector for this City represents 12.7% of our sales tax. The other sector is transportation. Under transportation, we have new auto. Under new auto, we have a decrease of 32.2%, and that category represents 11.7% of our sales tax. So those are two major drivers. And the Q2 report is included in the council's agenda packet that was published last night for a deeper dive for those that are interested in this meeting and also those that may be viewing online. So our projected reduction in sales tax, as noted there, in 2026, which is the current fiscal year, we anticipate about a 20% reduction, $8 to $9 million. Part of that is one time, which we are actively working on. It's contingent and we're hoping to be successful. The other part, we already are seeing declines on actual receipts itself. And then in 27, we anticipate going forward about 4 million or a bit more of ongoing reductions just due to these two major drivers right above. So we'll be incorporating these in our long range and also kind of showing you how we will be proactively working through how to balance our budget. Next slide. So popping over to the retiree benefit funding policy and PARS pension trust. I'll first start with the recommendation and then I'll kind of unpack how we get there and why we're doing this. So the retiree pension, we have a Section 115 trust, which is administered by PARS. For the purpose of the report and for the purpose of tonight, we'll call that the PARS Pension Trust. We are recommending that we transfer funds from PARS to CalPERS. We are recommending that that begin with the 2026 mid-year budget that will come to council in February. We'll need council's authorization. We are recommending that we make payments towards ADC. Commonly, I think if I'm a common person, I would describe that as employer costs. And then ADP, which is payment towards liability. The table below outlines in a very abbreviated format the recommendations. So for fiscal 26 mid-year, we would recommend it, and this is for all funds, not just the general fund, $10 million of ADP. In fiscal 27, in the budget development, we would recommend ADP of 20 million. And for 5 years, we're recommending in 27 through 31, ADC of 6 million. And then going forward, any balances in excess of the employer required contribution would be transferred to CalPERS as ADP. Lots of acronyms there.
Yeah, can you talk more ADP and ADC? This is, we got some more detail and I'm confused.
Of course, it took a while. Okay, so ADC is going to be paying towards our annual actuarially determined contribution. So that's our annual expense. So annually we pay in the current year, that is 70 million. We would be paying towards that 70 million. Kylie's whispering over here, that's the mortgage. We're paying towards that monthly mortgage. Okay. Then we also have the outstanding liability. So the principal outstanding on the mortgage. In the pension world, that's our unfunded liability. So that's paying the ADP.
So how does CalPERS work? Is it's not like a defined contribution plan, or is it?
So yes, it is a defined contribution plan, but I'm thinking that's not the question. You probably have another question.
So I'm wondering how we get unfunded liabilities, because they tell us how much to pay and we pay that and then they come back later. So if their returns aren't what we expect, then it's the difference between what they generate in returns and what the actuarial cost of the retirements.
So if we think, so I'm going to kind of zoom back and kind of describe it from the perspective of we have vested liabilities for these employment contracts that have a certain cost for vested benefits. That's the obligation, the total liability. So for us, that's about $2 billion. We have an asset to the credit of the city that's about $1.5 billion. The difference between the liability of 2 billion and the assets of 1.5 billion, that difference of a $500 million, that's the unfunded liability. Every year, CalPERS does actuarial studies to assess what's the vested liability, vested obligation of each employer, and what is the asset credited to each employer. And that difference is the unfunded liability. So we get that report every year. We present to the council of our funded status. And so bringing it back to this report tonight, when we say we're going to pay ADP, we're paying towards the $500 million. When we say we're paying ADC, that we're paying towards that annual payment we have to pay as a part of our budget.
So if CalPERS investments were exactly what they thought it would, we'd never have ADP.
We would never have the unfunded actuarial liability.
Okay.
Correct.
So, council member, it's not just
Well,
investments.
that's more. Yeah.
It's also their assumptions. So a couple things can change, right? They can change what they assume their assumed rate of return will be in the market. If they lower that, your liabilities go up. So there's some math associated with it as well. It's not simply market forces. It can also be age. It can be cost of medical. It could be salary growth. So there are a number of variables that go into calculating that as Director Lai just said, CalPERS reviews every 4 years to update a lot of those major assumptions.
They have 2 cycles. One is a demographic cycle, which runs every 2 years, I believe. And one is the LM cycle, which is more about investment strategy. So they do annual cycles on actuarials, demographics, I believe, every 2 years, and asset liability management and strategy every 4 years. We locally here have TrueComp to help us map our local costs. We also run our actuaries every 3 to 4 years in alignment with ALM. So we actually do even more in-depth local studies.
And can you refresh folks on what CalPERS has changed in their projected return over the last, when they start making changes 15 years ago?
Yeah.
How that has really affected all the cities that participate in CalPERS.
Yes. So commonly that's known as the discount rate. And so in the agenda packet, you'll see that discount rates by the CalPERS agency was as high as 8.5% back in history, and currently it's at 6.8%. So that has declined over the years as it continues to calibrate with anticipated more conservative projections of long-term returns. Now, keep in mind, CalPERS does studies with the understanding that they're looking long-term horizons, 20, 30 years. But that discount rate has gone down from 8.5% to 6.8%. And over the years, that has caused a lot of volatility in our liability and also in our pension costs. So locally here, we've adopted a policy to mitigate that, to increase our funded status, and also create some more stability as well.
And our rate is 5.3%, right?
Our policy rate is 5.3% on the normal cost, and so we contribute into PARS. Okay.
And
we have a self-imposed rate that is lower return than the CalPERS rate.
Yeah, and I have
We don't trust the 6.8.
Yeah, and I have a slide later when we get to it, and I can show that 5.3 rate has helped contribute money into PARS and kind of what we've built there in addition to that discipline and the accrued investment returns. So yes.
And so, go ahead.
Just going to ask, we are getting deep into
Yes.
the pit of unfunded liability,
Yes.
and which is great. Should we do this, or do you want to continue and then get to your questions?
I think the question about ADC and ADP was very timely because I could nerd out and go into the charts and we could be all confused. But if we can just kind of roll back into the slides, are we comfortable with the term ADC and ADP for the time being? So
Yeah.
a little bit, and we'll do another deep dive. Okay. All right. So let's see. Let's just make sure I see where we are in the slides. Okay. All right. So that's a brief table on the recommendation on cash flow. Let's go to the next slide, please. So the retiree benefit funding policy is much more substantial. And this slide here basically shows like 6 of the major points. It talks about funding goals and timeline. We want to be at 90% funded status within 15 years. That's a major takeaway. Funding components. So, we just mentioned the normal cost discount, normal cost assumption of 5.3%. CalPERS uses the discount rate of 6.8% on the normal cost. And so we've adopted that and we budget and fund accordingly. Any excess BSR we've put towards that in a couple of years when we've had it. Use of funds. Here's where it's important, and this is why we have this report before you. In the policy, it states that we should be transmitting anything in excess of 1 year of required employer contribution. So that amount above 1 year should be moved over from PARS to CalPERS. I'll walk you through that tonight. And that action requires council authority. So council needs to bless that and give us authority.
Can I just ask, you said we should, and in this report, it tells us what we should do at mid-year and next year and so on. Are you saying we haven't
Correct.
in the past?
Correct.
I
So,
see.
and I'll,
First time.
yes, and I'll explain.
So
what
we've been holding the section 115 in our own little pot, and now, for the first time,
Yes,
we're getting ready to send some of it to CalPERS.
yes, and
To pay down
Yes.
or to meet the obligations of our pension liability.
yes, and I'll reassure us that the PARS fund is actively invested. So it's not idle, it's actively investment with a pretty assertive portfolio strategy. So it's been accruing and having investment returns. When we walked through the transfer of monies to CalPERS, there's also something we need to think through, which is they have a different investment strategy and it's also higher risk. And so you'll see kind of like me outlining why we're not going to move it all. And you as a finance committee could look at that and say, we want a different balance. But these are a couple of things we can think about, okay? But yes, this will be the first transfer of funds from PARS to CalPERS. Okay, so may I resume? Okay, so reporting, the policy also stipulates that every 4 years we'll provide an update on the progress of the policy, align it with ALM, should we update the policy? That'll come back in October. Annually, we're supposed to develop the budget, make sure it's balanced, we're contributing, and then also any transmissions would be included in budget development. Service delivery outcomes. The policy was very smart in that it also contemplated that this high level of contribution could impact service delivery. And so staff was to identify the impacts and mitigate it through the budget process. This concept will be important as we look through balancing the budget in the upcoming year. Last but not least, it was also smart in contemplating that if the general fund revenues did steeply decline, it called out 7.5% year over year, that we would bring it back to council and make recommendations. So I think while the sales tax decline is not 7.5%, it's substantial enough for us to bring this all back in a comprehensive review. Okay. So next slide. Given the magnitude of our pension, it is very impressive that we have very robust oversight and our approach here is very comprehensive. We have all the actuarial reports I mentioned, the ALM process, we have a policy, we have staff oversight, we use technology, and we partner very closely with CalPERS. We have labor contracts that stipulate employee contributions. We've implemented the CalPERS reduced PEPRA state plans, and importantly also is investment strategy. We don't want to lose sight of the fact that we have money in PARS, but we also have oversight and an effective investment strategy for those funds as well. So,
would you mind referring to our trust as 115?
No
Is that
problem.
Okay?
Sure.
Tonight's the
PARS,
first night I feel like I'm hearing PARS.
okay.
It's
Sure.
the same thing. Are
It
we
is
using
the
them
same thing.
interchangeably? Okay.
Yes. So the section 115 is the legislation that allows us to do this. And we have it managed by PARS, which is a fund administrator. So I'm happy to call it section 115. All right. So tonight, the recommendation before you is founded based on the CalPERS actuarial evaluation report. The ALM recommendations, we've poured through the CalPERS report that went to their board in September. We also modeled the assumptions. We ran, I think, 6 different models with TrueComp and their experts, and also ran 3 models with Foster & Foster, which are actuaries. So a robust study as to what we're recommending tonight before you. Okay, so next slide, please. All right, so this table outlines what's happened in our Section 115 trust. So we have the balances there, and you could see how it's grown. That 5.3% that we referred to, that is that difference between 5.3 and 6.8. That difference is what we contribute into our Section 115 trust. And you could see in that yellow column how our balance has increased over time, right? It actually happened pretty quickly. And so it's like, we're all sitting here like, oh, why scratching our head? We should have transferred money to CalPERS. And there was a lot going on. And we're like, oh, well, look at this. We better do it now. And so hence you could see the contributions. You could see that third, fourth column there, 5 million, 6 million, 16 million. We've been very disciplined. And also the earnings as well. So in September, when we came to you, we mentioned that we had about 110 million based on the statement, and based on this year's contribution and estimated conservative earnings of only 4.5%, we anticipate we'll have 130 million by the end of June. All right, so that's a quick snapshot of the Section 115 trust. Okay, next slide. All right, this table is a bit harder to follow, but I'll do my best. So this is the cash flow of the recommendation and our estimation of the impact on our funded status. I always look at the funded status because I want us to reach that 90% goal. So let's go through the table. This is our 115 trust balance. Starting with column 1, we've got the fiscal year, the chronology. Column 2 is the balance. So we begin with 110 million and what happens to that over time. Now keep in mind, don't be anxious as that balance is declining, because our policy says we should be transmitting balances in excess of our annual obligation. They shouldn't be sitting here. Okay. Column 2 monetarily is our estimated contribution into the Section 115 trust from the city funds. So it's moving from city funds into the Section 115. Column 3 is the required employer contribution. How much do we have to pay every year? That mortgage number. So we in total pay 70 million in our budget. That's all funds. And so that's that yellow column. You'll see that that's declining, right? Because as we pay towards ADP, that's going to cause that number to decline. So the next column says, how much is that declining? I only tracked it for those 4 or 5 years. Eligible distribution, what does that mean? That means the balance of PARs versus the yellow number. So in the first 25-26, if we have 110 million and we implement the policy, we have an obligation to pay 70 million. There's an excess of $40 million, right? The difference between our balance and the difference between our required employee contribution, which is 70 million. We would be moving set 40 million over to CalPERS. That's not my recommendation, but that's how we read this table, okay? That's the excess that we can move. The blue are the recommendations. There are 2 columns. One is ADC, 5 years. We are going to pay towards the employer costs. ADP is paying towards the liability, the unfunded liability. You'll see there, I'm not recommending that we pay 40 or 50 million in those first few years. We're going to transfer 10 million, then 20, then 30, and then it then continues based on the eligible distribution. Again, because it has to do with the different investment strategies and level of risk, and just the readiness of council to take that on. If you'd like to transfer more, we can. But I'm just letting you know, kind of doing it over the next 3 years, and then it then follows the policy more consistently. The last 2 columns are the projected funded status. So how much of our obligation are we funded? When do we forecast we'll get to 90%? We have a column that's including our trust balance and a column that does not include our trust balance. I highlight in green the 90%, like where we think we're going to achieve 90% funded status. So this is all plans. We have safety and non-safety. And in both of those cases, the projections determine that we're going to reach the 90% before that 15-year goal of 2036. Okay. Okay to move on. I imagine we'll come back to this table.
Okay.
Yeah, but okay, we have some questions here. Okay. All right. So I'm going to go through a couple of line charts, conclude on the recommendation, and then we could do some deeper dives. Next slide. What does this do in terms of our employer cost, in terms of impact to budget, right? This is very important. The green line here outlines if we did nothing, this is the employer costs in our budget for all plans, all funds. This contribution and this continued discipline is the pink line, the recommendation played out. So you'll see there, we have that reduction in employer costs, and then eventually it flattens out because we reach that funded status. Key assumptions are out there over there on the side. This assumes 30 million is based on shortest basis, and then we move towards longest basis. We continue to contribute into the section 115. It does assume the 6.8% discount rate on the unfunded liability. It has assumptions on payroll growth, inflations. It uses the actuarial report, and then also it assumes our current PARS balance of 110 million, and also an earnings of PARS of 4.5%, which is fairly conservative given the actual returns we've been experiencing.
Lauren, can you just explain why it flattens out in 38, 39, but we get to 100% sooner than that, according to the chart on the prior page?
The payment obligation flattens out because our UAL gets paid. So this is our employer payment. Our employer payment is made of two components. One is called normal costs, like that years of service, and another portion is due to unfunded actuarial liability. If we pay off that outstanding principal of liability, then all we have to pay over time is what's called normal costs, that current year's liability, that current year's payment. So we still have a payment.
No, I'm just seeing, I thought on the prior page, we get out of the unfunded, we get to 100% of our, the cost of our unfunded pension liability, either in 35, 36 with our 115 trust, or sometime by 2037 if it's without the trust.
Yes.
Am I reading that? Am I understanding that
You
right?
are understanding it right. I have 3 slides for you.
Right.
This slide is our employer costs. What are we paying? So let's pop to that slide that you're interested. Can you advance us to slide 13, please? And then we'll come back to 12. So 13 is the funded status. So we're about 70%, 72% funded. If you add the trust, we're about 77% funded. This is the slide that shows we'll get to that 90% and then eventually 100%. Okay. So the other slide that we were talking about that charted the employer cost. This charts the funded status.
Lauren, on the slide 11, as we go back to it.
Yes.
Is this indicating that our contribution will be lower than we were projecting as a result of the transfer?
Yes.
And by how much? I can't.
If we go
Fiscal year, this coming 26, 27 and 28, 29.
Yes.
By how much?
If we go back to slide 10, it's a two-folded question. We will show you the impact of these transfers. I think the other thing we need to do is align what's in the yellow column with last year's long range. So as we're doing this real time, I'm going to give you one part answer, but I owe you part 2 as we as a committee go through long range. Part 1, which I can answer tonight, in that 5th column where it says change in REC, right next to the yellow, that's the reduction in employer costs. So as we make these transfers, for example, our employer cost, the first number is 69.6 million. Next year, it's 68.7 million, 65.4. The change is in the next column.
But that's changed from the previous year, not
Correct.
changed from the previous projection.
Correct. So then what I owe this committee and the council is how does these new numbers in yellow align with last year's LRFF, because we had made certain assumptions, and also based on CalPERS information from a year ago. So as we develop the budget, we're going to see how that improves. But yes, it will make an impact and will be a part of budget balancing.
But don't we have what the projection was for 26, 27, 27, 28?
We do. It's just we're doing everything real time, and it was a feat to get this tonight as a recommendation.
Okay, well, I'm
So if you'll give us the
comparing
grace
it
to come
the
back,
First half of
we-
the report we are seeing.
If we get- if we get through tonight and you all feel good about the recommendation, I feel that that's a success. And I do recognize there's more homework to do, such as calculating this difference. Okay, so if we're okay, we'll get to slide 12. Okay, so slide 12, I also want to chart for you is the unfunded liability. We're about $500,000,460 between all plans. And so what this shows is the impact over time as we make the ADP payments. And you'll see there it decreases pretty significantly. And so we just wanted to chart that out for you. In the attachments, we have 5 different scenarios. The chart before you is outlining the projections that support the cash flow that's being recommended to you as a committee and ultimately to the council.
In the legend there, can you explain? It's kind of cryptic, the green and the pink text.
Yes. So the green is the based on the CalPERS actuarial valuation, updated based upon their most recent earnings release. So June 30th of 2025, CalPERS investment portfolio for the 12-month ended earned 11.6%. So as we incorporate that into our plan, our information, that's the green line. That's the do nothing. This is kind of what would play out if we didn't have any funds and we did nothing. We have PARs, we have those Section 115 savings, and if we make the assumptions we do have in this model, and we also transfer those funds, the dotted line is what will play out. What is the pink line? That is outlined basically on, let's see, slide 10. So if we'd like to go back to slide 10, it's perhaps a little bit easier for me to explain. So that pink line is basically modeling the projected outcome of this scenario.
Oh, the pink line.
Yes. So the transmitting of the ADC, the transmitting of the ADP, and incorporating assumptions about investment returns, and also payroll growth and inflation.
Isn't it kind of modeling the last 2 columns?
Did
we get there funded without the trust and with the trust?
Those are kind of the results, but the model plays out the contributions with other assumptions.
And at a high level, is it on the green line that in addition to us having our Section 115 trust to reduce our long-term liability, CalPERS has also is working to reduce the unfunded liability, right? That's in the green line.
Oh, absolutely.
And then so they weren't ignoring the unfunded liabilities.
Oh,
They're
absolutely.
just working to diminish that liability at a more rapid rate than they are.
Oh, absolutely.
Okay.
Absolutely. That's why they are very keen every year to do the actuarial report, every few years to do the demographic review to make sure significant assumptions in the actuary are still current. And last but not least, this ALM, it's encryptic, it's called ALM, but their investment strategist team are really looking at what is the right balance of risk and investment portfolio strategy to get the return for the portfolio.
And if we were to go back in time, 10 or 15 years, we'd see that green line going up to, and then I don't know when it exactly reversed course from their actions, but it's basically, well, they had, now I think about it, even it goes back to the kind of the dot-com boom. They had highly unrealistic projections, and they and we, as a result of that, they couldn't make these adjustments all at once, or they would have bankrupted a bunch of cities.
Right.
And so it's been a gradual process.
Mm-hmm. And they've implemented different policies around, how to improve that liability, unfunded liability, through, risk mitigations on the discount rate, investment strategies, and also the amortizations of gains and losses. This sounds very technical. It is very technical and very important. But to your point, CalPERS board has been very proactive in trying to bring down that liability for all employers, and at the same time, not correct it so much that it crowds out our ability to provide services locally. Okay, I believe those are all the line charts. If we could pop to slide 14, please. Some of the major components as to the benefits of the transfer of funds from the Section 115 trust to CalPERS. One, we would be implementing our policy. The policy calls to transfer these funds. Also with the goal and objective of meeting that 90% funded status. It would reduce our pension costs and liability. I think the other important during this time of a lot of uncertainty around our budget, this strategy enables us to have some stability and predictability around short, mid, and long-term funding strategy. That's really critical. It also ensures that we have continuity and reliability of essential city services. Last but not least, it'll provide us time to develop a long-term vision around revenues and also a strategy on how to achieve, I think, a more robust, more diverse revenue base for our city general fund especially. Okay, last two slides, and then we'll turn it over to, I'm sure, more questions. So this multi-year, multifaceted budget strategy includes budget reductions. So you may recall, Council, in the September timeframe, we reduced general fund budget by about 2%, which was $6 million. This would entail further reductions in 27 to balance the budget. In addition, we're going to explore new revenues. It's very important for us. We've done that in prior years. We'll continue to do that. We are looking towards reducing pension costs. That's the item before you tonight. We will be looking at using reserves on a limited basis because it is one-time money. We are going to look at ways to reduce and defer CIP without impacting critical projects or projects already underway. And last but not least, look at ways to deliver our service with more efficiency and also using technology and other innovations. We will show this in our 5-year forecast and go through it with more detail in 2 weeks when this comes back to you in the long-range plan. Okay, closing slide. The recommendation before you is for you to review and accept this report, which updates your major tax revenues, and then also forward to the council for their consideration to continue the contributions to the Section 115 trust, to transfer 10 million from the trust to ADP, to CalPERS for ADP in the 26 mid-year, to transfer 20 million to CalPERS as ADP during the 27 through 26 forecast. Look towards balancing 27's budget in the tune of $6 to $8 million reductions, transferring $6 million from the Section 115 to CalPERS for ADC. And last but not least, we are going to be very assertive around the one-time potential contingency of the sales tax reduction. We are going to continue to advance state discussions, but should that happen, we may need to bring an update back to council at mid-year and address that with the transfer towards ADC to mitigate that impact. Just highlighting that, again, that's a contingency, more to come there, but wanted to make awareness around that. Next slide is just, again, the timeline on where we are. Again, no specific budget action tonight. This will come back to you in 2 weeks when we show you the long range and incorporate the strategies, and that'll go to council in January. I believe the next slide just concludes. We're here to answer any questions. We have both Drew and Dan available on call, and myself. So thank you so much.
Okay. Can you go back to 16 then? Slide 16. Okay, so I'm looking at the fourth bullet there. So that means we're looking at cutting costs within the city 6 to 8. Then in addition to those cuts, we're also perhaps reducing the amount. So effectively that's, and I assume that's 6 million in the next transmit $6 or $6 million.
$6 million,
Okay.
not $6.
$6. Okay. So we're transmitting $6 million from PARS to CalPERS to cover our ADC. So effectively, we are reducing our ADC by pulling some money out of PARS.
Correct. And I should clarify that 6 million is all funds. The general fund portion of that is about 65%. So the general fund portion would be about 3.6 million.
Okay. So does that effectively reduce the amount that we're putting in PARS that year?
In the net effect, yes. So we would be contributing, for example, based on that slide, let's see, we are contributing, let's say 14 million. And in that year, we would be pulling out 6 to transfer to CalPERS.
The net is we'd be just putting in 8 million instead of 14.
Correct. And that's modeled out in slide 10 and also through the line chart.
Okay.
And that was very important to me, was to see what the net impact was.
No, I understand. When you have budget shortfalls, if we think it's short term, then this may be an appropriate thing. But if this goes on, then you're kind of defeating the whole purpose of having the Section 115.
That's right. That's why if we go back to slide 10, this is very important. My measurements are those ADCs are for 5 years. The 10 and 10 is a contingency modeling in case the one time is unsuccessful. But the recommendation is it's 6 million for those 5 years. And then the ADPs, but I'm constantly looking at the impact in those last 2 columns.
Oh, okay. Gotcha. So that column is money we're taking out of PARS and using to pay for our ADC.
Yeah, so those 2 columns, the short column, the ADC, is the budget balancing for 5 years on top of, in addition to the cuts. And then ADP is paying down liability, which affects our pension costs as well, but it affects it a lot slower because you have to amortize that. And again, the measurement for me I look at are those 2 columns on the end, is if we implemented this and continue the contributions, what will happen to our funded status?
And from our long-term projection, at least the one 9 months ago that we saw, it's ramping up and revenues is growing. And so this 5-year of $6 million, that's just to kind of hold off until the revenues catch up with our spending.
Yes. Yes. So as you might recall in September when we brought this to you, in the short term 5 years, we have upticks in our employer costs because we have some pretty expensive loss bases that are amortizing out. So that's very nerdy for me to say it that way, but technically that means that our employer cost in our budget goes up in the short term until it flattens out. And so this enables us to address the sales tax loss coupled with that short-term spike, right? Because honestly, we can only make so many cuts before we see some real significant impacts to services. So we're trying to balance this policy objectives with what we can do with balancing the budget, to be honest with you.
Okay. Thank you. That was useful. In the packet on page 82, you don't have to bring it up, but it showed the last quarter of property tax and stuff like this, and some of those were really small. It's really lumpy, the revenue coming in.
Yes, very much so. Property tax in particular for homeowners, you commonly pay in November, December, and you pay again in April. Some people like to pay all of it in November, December for tax purposes, but certainly property tax, which is our number one general fund revenue, doesn't come to us monthly on a linear basis. So this Q1 report, which is September 31st to September 30th, we had like very little receipts.
Oh, so the only money we got was from the early payers.
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
Mm-hmm.
Well, that's interesting.
Yes.
And same with business tax. And how do we get business tax?
Business tax is paid quarterly, and I might be wrong on this, but it's like 30 days after the quarter ends, and it's past due 45 or 60 days. So before you kind of know it, you're into May before you get any real receipts. And so it takes a while. We get it paid quarterly, but it's about 30 days after each quarter. So even as of the Q1 report, we may not be having a whole quarters of receipt either.
But why didn't we get the last quarter from the previous quarter? Why didn't that roll into this current quarter?
It could have, or I didn't look at it that closely, but it's a little lumpy too.
Okay. Anyway, the short answer is it's kind of lumpy.
Yes. Sales tax especially. Yes.
And you talked about the online sales going into a pool.
Yes.
And how's that broken down? Is by the county and then we get a prorated amount, or is it by zip code, or how do we get that money?
Exactly. Just like that.
By zip code or goes to the county and
it goes to the county, and then from the county, it goes out to the city jurisdictions, goes out to the city jurisdiction based on our distribution of in-place sales. That's the best way to, our brick and mortar sales. So our brick and mortar sales as a weighted average of the whole county. So for us, we're about 6% of the whole county's brick and mortar sales. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
And so, so that 6% is our 6% proportionate share of the pool.
So it doesn't matter how many people buy stuff off Amazon in Palo Alto. What matters is the whole county, and then we get 6% of that.
That's an abbreviated explanation. The online distribution of pools is much more technical, and I can't answer all the nuances around Amazon, Wayfair. I would need some assistance to answer the specifics, but
for the most part, we get 6% of whatever the county gets.
Correct.
Okay.
Correct.
Okay. Looking at the report in last night's packet, I was downtown. We see both growth in
the sales informational item.
Yeah, at the back of last night's packet, we saw not only growth in restaurants. Restaurants are doing well downtown, but also just general retail is growing too, and that's very
promising.
Yeah, that is very promising. So that made me feel like the world is not crashing down on us here. Okay. So big picture, why did we choose to do a Section 115 trust as opposed to just giving more money to CalPERS right away?
Sometimes it has to do with trust.
Okay.
And so agencies have felt very confused, and it feels like this big black box, and we get these huge voluminous reports, as you remember, and there's local trust or distrust. Two is when you put it in a 115 trust, there is still local control. Hence tonight's conversation.
If we give it to them, then we couldn't
take it back, and it only goes towards liability. So the brilliance of having a 115 trust is you have local control.
And you can use it to pay your ADC if you want.
Right. It's a beautiful concept and it's really important and we have to use it judiciously. In addition, you have local control over the investment strategy and the level of risk. So here under PARS, we can select the different investment strategies. We have an investment strategy at PARS, which is less risky than the CalPERS strategy. And again, that's local agency control. So the state law was great in allowing local agencies to have this prerogative. The other aspect of the Section 115 in terms of local control is it creates more flexibility in terms of investments. You may recall a couple weeks ago, or we came before you with Chandler and the investment transition. Those are all fixed income investments. If we didn't have Section 115, can you imagine we're only going to earn 2 to 4%? So the Section 115 allows for us to have a different investment strategy because it governs different things.
What is the asset allocation in the PARS?
About 50 to 70% in equity.
Okay.
And about, I think, 20 to 30% then on fixed income. It's in the report, but
And-
50 to 70% in equity.
Can you remind us what our return has been in the PARS?
In PARS, I don't have it off the top of my head. I have Kayla who's on call, and maybe she can ping me the answer in a few.
And so CalPERS, they have all private equity and stuff like that in there, but they claim their reference asset allocation is 75% equity, which and you indicated that that's more risky.
Correct. They are at a 70-30 mix. Staff recommendation in this ALM is recommending a 75-25% split. 75% equity, 25% split to fixed income.
For,
So they're making it
for our 115, or this is for CalPERS?
CalPERS.
Okay.
We are not changing.
Okay. So what is ALM?
Asset liability management, that is the 4-year cycle where CalPERS goes through and analyzes its investment strategy and how it manages its portfolio, the composition, the risk taking, and the estimated discount rate for the next 4 years. So they're doing that right now. Their staff already completed it and made their initial reading and recommendation to their board on September 15th.
And so when we give the money to CalPERS, do we guide them at all, or does it goes into the general fund at CalPERS and then they make all the decisions?
The latter.
Okay. Okay. That's all I have. Thank you.
Welcome.
Thank you for this. Sounds like our policy says we should be giving anything above the REC to CalPERS.
Mhm.
And we get to decide whether it's toward the cost or the liability, right?
Correct.
And we haven't paid it yet.
Correct.
And maybe we should have
Yes.
sooner.
Right. So if we were to follow the policy to a T, if you go to slide 9, after June 30th, actual balance of 84 million, we probably could have transferred 10, 15 million.
Okay.
Typically, we don't go to you until like September as a finance committee, so it could have happened October of 24 if we were kind of playing catch up.
So here we are facing another year of budget cuts, and we've decided we have a pot of money in our Section 115 trust, and we're supposed to be allocating bits of it out to CalPERS. And we're going to help me understand why we chose our Section 115 trust as a way to approach solutions to the budget shortfall versus reducing the BSR.
Oh,
Or why this?
this is one of many components. So next week, 2 weeks from now, when we put before the committee the long-range plan, it will have use of BSR. The BSR combines uncertainty reserve because I think the committee said it's too confusing. Let's put it into one pot. So use of reserve. It also further looks at reducing the budget. We have to make cuts, right? We need to balance the budget. We're looking at different revenues and also deferring CIP. This is only one component of the multiple strategies.
And, you know, I always cite Eric Philseth when we get to this conversation. I met with him for like an hour and a half to learn about this stuff. He has this great tutorial online.
Yes.
I just sent you the link, Keith.
Yes.
And, you know, I feel like whomever, along with Eric, Pat, forgive me if you were deeply involved with this. I apologize. I have no idea. Were you?
With the setting up the
Okay.
second one.
Right. So they decided this is our way to protect ourselves from CalPERS potential mismanagement or setting the discount rate in the wrong place and not yielding the results that we all need in order to pay our pension liability. So we had this genius think tank here in Palo Alto. We created this thing. It's really done well. It's, like, yay, us, like filling that hole in, not digging a bigger hole.
Right.
And yet now we're like, but now we can, we're ready to reduce our reliance on it, or we're ready to kind of wind it down in some ways, it looks like.
We are implementing the plan. So let's go back to slide 10.
And can I describe it as that we've reached the point where we're supposed to start doing these transfers? And I don't know about the coincidence, but it's the timing works well with when we're having challenges. Yeah, but it was predetermined that
Yes.
at this point of asset accumulation, we'd begin to do these transfers.
Right. And it was predetermined in the policy that if there are service impacts and if there are revenue losses, that the council and staff would reconcile that. And it was very considerate that way because this policy, which is a substantial funding policy, does not stand alone and independent of local service impacts or the reality of our budget and financial position. But we are implementing the plan as we go. It's not an abandonment or a 180 or 90-degree from it. So here you'll see the contribution. We're still planning contributions in that column called contributions. We are still planning the ADP payments, which is basically the policy says we should be transferring money from the Section 115 to CalPERS. It specifically says any balance above the required employer contribution. So those two components certainly are. The ADC is where we're saying, look, we have a budget deficit. We have the second largest sales property, second largest tax revenue has a decline. We need to address it. So the policy allows that, and we're proposing a 5-year strategy. And so it is very consistent with policy. Wanted to go through that.
I guess I would ask, how conservative or aggressive are these revenue estimates? When you think about what you're hoping to achieve with this strategy, and we're making these forecasts and projections, where are you in your sense of comfort about this is a conservative strategy, this is an aggressive strategy?
Strategy estimates for general fund revenue, is that a question? Yes. So what I can share is, our general fund sales tax revenue, which is what we're talking about here, is really driven by our close relationship and working with Avenue, who is a consultant. They have all of our sales tax information that's confidential from the state. We study that with them and we project it based on our analysis of our major payers. So this is based on relying on the information we have at this time. It's our best guess. And again, we have to proactively plan for contingencies. On the property tax side, we work closely with the county. They meet with local city jurisdictions quarterly. They release updates on their tax roll, so we follow it very closely with them. In addition, we consult with HDL. They generate very in-depth property real estate information that we meet with them about 4 times a year to review their reports. So I think this is our best guess right now. I think this recommendation to this committee and the council would be sound. The other aspect that I like about ADC is we would like to plan this for 5 years, but say our financial position improves. We don't need to make the $6 million payment every year. That's every year we're going to get authorization from council. So say our revenue improves, then we may say we should only transfer 4 or 2. That's the beauty of the ADC as well, right? That's going to be annually, we're going to we're going to show that again in the budget every year to say we need this to balance the budget, or we may not need this to balance the budget. So we're laying out a 5-year plan, but again, every year we're going to go to council to say we need to balance it like this. So unlike a home mortgage, we are not committing to CalPERS a new payment plan. There is such a thing that exists with CalPERS. It's called a refresh, I believe. Refresh, fresh start, refresh, fresh start. Where? Exactly. But literally, it's like your home mortgage. You go from 30 years to 15 years and you're locked in. No getting out. That's not what we're recommending. We want local control. We want to be able to be responsive to our financial conditions and our service portfolio here. So we are using the flexibility of the Section 115 trust. So that ADC is a 5-year plan, but our conditions may improve and we may need less. So wanted to share that as well. You're welcome.
So to Lauren's point, Lauren, I think staff has given us the PARS earnings. Looks like a 1-year earning was 11%, 3-year earning was 13.6, and a 5-year earning was 6.7. So if they were to smooth them, that's about what the PARS trust is making. And just to reinforce kind of what Lauren's talking about, and as someone who was here with council as we established this and this funding policy, the local control that Lauren's talking about is really the reason we did a trust fund. Because it allowed us to pivot and move and adjust as a local agency needed to, because we're balancing a lot of different variables. And once you send that money to CalPERS, it's a one-way transaction. You can't get it back. So this allowed us that flexibility. And to Lauren's point, the PARS Trust has done, frankly, better than we thought it was. And when we did the last round, we look at the funding policy every 4 years on purpose, like Lauren said, and we expected in this coming year, so we were going to have to do, as Lauren said, an update to the pension funding policy review. Our year 4 is coming. Mm-hmm. We're simply 11 months early because we need to be. And we knew when we came up with this next round of funding review that we would be at a stage where we needed to make a decision on whether or not we wanted to continue collecting it in the trust or if we wanted to start distributing it. So we're on track with, expectations and done better, frankly, in terms of the market return since the money's been in the account. So if that gives you any additional confidence that we were expecting to have this policy discussion, just probably next fall. But given the need for this, Lauren's like, we have enough. Let's accelerate it and deal with our financial situation with a multi-pronged approach.
Did we check if we had members of the public to speak? Oh my gosh.
We do not have any requests to speak.
Okay. And so the request is that, sorry.
One follow-up.
Yeah, go ahead.
So CalPERS looks at our employees and they look at the ages and how close they are to retirement. And they tell us this is how much it's going to cost. That's how they base the cost on that. And then when people retire, we have to pay for them, or does it become like an insurance policy where all the risk, what happens if all our retirees lived to 110? Do we have to pay that extra money, or does CalPERS have to pay the extra money?
We do.
We do.
Yes. But the thinking again, that demographic study, I mentioned the 3 cycles, the annual actuarial, the demographic cycle, and the ALM investment strategy. The demographic cycle is what protects the CalPERS agency and also protects the city as employers, as members as well. They calibrate, are women or men living longer? What is the percentage of COLA? What's CPI? Again, they're looking over all the employers, but that's what that demographic study is doing, is calibrating that.
Maybe we should be investing in like Bacon of the Month Club for our retirees. Okay. Okay, thank you.
Okay, so the request is that we accept the general fund major tax revenue supplement reported to the council with the additional recommendations to transmit funding from PARS pension trust to CalPERS and incorporate that into the long range forecast. Is it good with that?
Oh, you'll need to turn on the mic, sorry.
I'm going to repeat that.
Okay.
So the recommendation is that we accept the general fund major tax update, and that we have an additional recommendation to transmit funding from CalPERS pension trust, from the PARS pension trust to CalPERS and incorporate that into the long range forecast.
I move the staff recommendation.
Second.
Okay. Any other discussion? All in favor? Aye, that passes unanimously. All right, thank you. And that takes us to discussion and update on the fiscal year 2027 preliminary utility financial forecast and rate projections. You're back.
Hello.
So, Mr. Chair, I will introduce staff here as well. Again, Alan Curatore, Director of Utilities. Carla Daly is plugging in her laptop. Adriana Artola is our new Senior Resource Planner in our water utility. She'll be joining us, and she'll be tag teaming an update on the water side with Lisa Belair as our Senior Water Resources Planner. I did want to mention this is our preliminary rates. It's as you may know, with the 5 utilities we have, it's about a $500 million utility. So we have a series of slides. We put additional details in the slides so they stand alone for the public to read through them. I've asked staff to kind of go through them. These are typical slides that you see in terms of the rate increases, the impacts, how we match those up to reserves. So you'll see a high level overview of that, and then we'll leave it open for the Finance Committee to give us staff feedback to staff. Thank you.
Thank you, Alan. And I'll kick it off here with the overview. So this is our preliminary rate projections, and we have primarily based these on the year end for fiscal year 2025 reserve balances at year end. And we also updated some expense estimates where we could, and where we knew there were some large changes, but we are going to continue to evolve our forecasts as we go through the budget process and update every single number. Where we ended up with this forecast is that for every utility other than gas, the rate trajectory is the same as what we brought to the council in June. Yeah, so even though the underlying numbers have been updated and some of the numbers have changed, we were looking at the same rate trajectories. Gas is different because that sales declined more than we thought in 2025. We did a robust analysis of the gas load forecast using a statistically adjusted end use model. So they look at end uses and then adjust it with regression. And so with that, we use that sales forecast, and we are looking at a 9% increase instead of a 6% increase in fiscal year 2027 for the gas utility. Yeah, next slide. Thank you. So this shows the overview of the rate increases, and you can see that we're proposing in this preliminary projection, I shouldn't say proposing, this is just a preliminary projection where we are asking you for your feedback and discussion on this. there's no action. And what we're looking at is an overall 9% increase or $37.80. And that's on a bill that's $442. You can see that in the footnote. Now, I do want to make a side note on gas because we just talked about the gas cost of service study earlier. This assumes that the council approves the gas cost of service study adjustments. And so that's embedded in here. And this is a 9% that is different and in addition to the gas cost of service study adjustments for the median residential customer. The rate increases support a variety of community goals, including investments in grid reliability and modernization that will allow us to meet the council's sustainability and climate action goals. They also support maintaining and replacing infrastructure in both the water distribution system, wastewater collection system, as well as paying towards the rebuild of the wastewater treatment plant. Next slide, please. So it is an ongoing priority for the utilities department to contain costs and look for ways to reduce our costs. So this is a series of slides that shows our recently implemented, our ongoing, and our future cost containment efforts that we're currently working on. I'm not going to go into details on these, but if you have questions, we'd be happy to talk through those. We just wanted to really emphasize the importance of this type of work on cost containment.
I have one question on the AMI, the second bullet. So that's an operational saving, but we had a capital investment. So is this net after amortizing the capital investment, or are we looking at the capital investment in the AMI separately, and then we're saying we get this much operational savings?
Davian, Utility Strategic Business Manager. For the AMI project, the electric portion of it, like 10 million of it, came from the electric special project reserves. So that didn't come from the rates or operation reserves. So that was from that special project reserves we had. So that is not being, so this is ongoing savings for the electric fund. For the water and gas side, it is not netted out against the capital investment. And that's about 5 million each for those two utilities.
Okay, thanks.
Was that investment, was that rate money or was that other non-rate money?
We borrowed the money from also the electric special project reserves, and we're planning to pay it back over 3 years or 5 years after completion of the project. So we haven't started the repayment yet. So the first payment will be like $1 million starting in probably 2027.
What is the special reserves? I'm not familiar with that.
You want to take a chance?
Is it complicated or?
I think this was established back in in the early 2000s when they were trying to deregulate electric. And so we created the special hydro reserves, or Calaveras reserves, I'm saying. And that we accrued probably like $50 or $60 million since then. And it's been set aside for special projects that would benefit electric ratepayers, such as the AMI project.
Okay. Thank you.
I think we have 30 million remaining. I think some of that's being set aside for the second transmission quarter that's coming.
If we could please move forward to the electric utility slides, and then we can come back to any questions on these slides. So if you could, oh, thank you. Yes, if you could go to the next slide, please. So for the so we'll move through slides on each of the utilities, and this will start with the electric utility. So our preliminary projection is a 6% rate increase in fiscal year 27. The net supply cost forecast is increasing 3% higher than last year's forecast. We do have a load forecast increase that's 8% higher than the fiscal year 26 forecast. We're still planning to issue debt for grid modernization later in this current fiscal year. And that's something that we're actively working on and continuing to reevaluate. And some of the drivers for this increase are capital spending and distribution system maintenance spending rising. We also need to replenish reserves, And we also have some factors that are increasing our supply costs listed there. Next slide, please. This slide tries to break out what the where the money goes for this 6%. So as you can see, the vast majority of it in 2027 is necessary because of CIP. We're going to have debt service associated with our grid modernization costs, as well as paying for some of those costs through revenue funded dollars. And we need to replenish the CIP reserve. In the electric utility, the CIP reserve is near zero. Next slide, please. And then the next few slides show a picture of the different reserves as well as cost and revenue. So this slide shows in the bars, the stacked bars show the different costs for the electric utility. The year that we're projecting right now is in 2027, and that is in bold. And then the revenue line is at the top. And at the very top of each bar, you can see a percentage number, and that's the rate increase that either occurred in the past or that is projected for the future. So you can see that 6% level above 2027. Next slide, please. This slide shows the electric utilities operations reserve combined for the supply and distribution. And there's a lot of notations on the side that explain all of the different reserve targets, maximum and minimum, and risk assessment levels. If you have any questions, I do want to note that the electric utility, we aren't showing it in these charts, but there is a hydro stabilization reserve that has a balance of 18.7 million, and that is available to manage some of the risk associated with changing hydro conditions. Next slide, please. This is the CIP reserve that I mentioned. The preliminary projection, we are planning to gradually restore that reserve to within the guideline range and to within the middle of the target range. Next slide, please. Palo Alto's electric bills are approximately half of PG&E's for Palo Alto's residents and businesses. And so we just wanted to highlight that, and we're very, very pleased to be able to mention that to you. Next slide. When you look beyond PG&E at other municipal comparison agencies, Palo Alto also has favorable electric rates compared with Alameda. Next slide, please. For the gas utility, the proposal, as I mentioned, is a 9% overall rate increase, and this is due to a 14.5% distribution rate increase in fiscal year 27. As I mentioned, the distribution sales revenue were below forecast in 2025, and our analysis shows that it will continue to be a little bit lower than last year's forecast, about 4% below the last year's forecast. We also have increasing CIP costs and the need to replenish reserves. Next slide. So you can see the breakdown of the 9% increase is primarily driven by increases in CIP, but also lower sales revenue. Next slide, please. This is the similar stacked bar chart of the costs and revenues and the line at the top. And you can see the 9% increase in 2027. And I did want to highlight that the gas utility has received some federal grant funds. Those are allowing the utility to do additional capital investment in main replacements and other capital work. And those funds are reflected in the chart. How much? 16.5 million. Yeah, so those are reflected in 26 and 27, and that's some work that is going on right now. Next slide, please. In the gas operations reserve, it was below minimum in 2024, at the year end 2024. In 2025, there are about $8.6 million being held in the CIP reappropriations reserve that are expected to be reimbursed through a grant. And so if you include those funds, the operations reserve is within the guideline range, but close to the minimum. And we are expecting through this plan to bring that operations reserve up to approximately the target by the end of the 5-year forecast period. Next slide. The CIP reserve in the gas utility also is empty. And so this plan would bring that gradually up to within the guideline range by the end of the 5-year period. Next slide. Our gas bills are approximately 9%. If you look at the bottom line of that top table for residential customers, approximately 9% below PG&E. And for commercial customers, it is a range, but they are above PG&E, about between 9 and 50% above PG&E. Next slide. And then for the water utility.
All right, so for the water utility, consistent with the fiscal 2026 financial plan, we're projecting a 10% overall rate increase for fiscal 27, and that's reflecting a 16% distribution rate increase and a 1% SFPUC wholesale rate increase. And looking at the 5-year rate trajectory, this is also consistent with last year's financial plan with the update of the 9% for 2031. These rate increases are driven by capital spending, which I'll speak more to on the next slide. And they are projected to support the reserve balances remaining within the guideline ranges throughout the 5-year planning period. Next slide. So this bar chart shows the drivers behind the 10% rate increase, with the primary drivers being capital, namely the seismic improvements to 2 reservoirs or tanks as we call them, and also ongoing water main replacement projects. These projects aren't scheduled to occur until fiscal years 29 and 2030, but we're setting funds aside for those projects now in order to have a smooth rate trajectory over the planning period. So that's why you see the largest driver being a transfer to the capital reserve in fiscal 27. Additionally, we're seeing, maybe a little bit more modest inflationary factors here, relative to the overall rate increase, as well as a small increase to the operating reserve. I'll also say that, underlining this rate increase are the revenue impacts from the most recent drought, long-term decline in demand, as well as the lower rate increases in prior years. And next slide. This slide kind of further illustrates that the drivers of the rate increases over the 5 years is capital spending, with operations and water supply costs kind of gradually increasing over the 5-year period, whereas a little bit more fluctuating but still driving the upward trajectory is the capital spending, with 2030 being a year where we are planning to complete one of the seismic upgrades as well as a water main replacement project. Go next slide. This slide shows the operations reserve balances, actuals through 25, and then projected. At fiscal 2025 year end, we did end with a high balance, higher than projected or expected, and that was mainly due to capital spending being lower than budgeted, as well as operation expenses being lower than expected. But we do plan to spend down that reserve balance in 2026 on capital, but then, maintain the operations reserve balance above the minimum guideline levels through the planning period. This is a change. If you're look at last year's or the fiscal 2026 projections, we were projecting to be below the minimum guideline range. So we are seeing an improvement here from that positive year-end result for fiscal 25. And I'll also note that because the year-end balance was so high, we did not draw down on the rate stabilization reserve. Next slide. Yeah.
When we've got that dotted blue line of the risk assessed maximum historical commodity revenue variance, does that suggest that our reserves are greater, or our target range on reserves are greater than they really need to be? Or am I misunderstanding that?
That line reflects that if revenues were to underperform to a degree, as worse as we've seen in the past 10 years, what the reserve balance could look like. That's my understanding.
So it's more a worst case scenario of what a reserve balance would become. Okay. Okay, thanks.
So that means if you were at the minimum and then you saw commodities go up, that's what the reserve would shrink to?
This would be if there were unexpected costs, if revenues were to underperform. The commodity costs are passed through our commodity charge. But, if there was some unforeseen event that would result in, a large revenue impact.
The dotted line is where the reserve ends up being.
Yeah, in a hypothetical situation where there was a large revenue impact of some kind
And
or expense, large expense, yeah.
And that's starting from what spot? So that when that incident occurs, are you in the center of the target or are you down at the bottom? Do you know?
That's a good, yeah.
Okay.
I would go ahead, do you
So I would just offer that it's not really starting from one of the spots. It's just a different metric that we're looking at. We're looking at, the reserve targets and minimum and maximum guidelines that we're following the Government Financial Officers Association guideline for range for what that is. That was approved in our reserve management policies. But we also, in addition, look at, as Adriana was explaining, a separate metric, which for each utility of the unlikely instance where our revenue drops by the largest amount that it has in 10 years. So that's just a separate line showing approximately how much that would be. So basically it goes from 0 up to that blue line. Okay.
Yeah, I should.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you, Lisa. Next slide. So here are the CIP reserve balance projections. As you can see, we are projecting to slowly build up the CIP reserve up to 2029 to then spend it down in 2030 when the seismic improvement and water main replacement projects occur. I will say that the CIP spending assumptions that we've included in these projections do have some conservative assumptions. And so we do expect this to represent kind of the upper limit of potential capital spending, with an example being that for those two improvements to the seismic tanks, we're currently assuming replacing those tanks, but there will be a assessment over the next year to determine whether we should be replacing them or rehabilitating them. And if we rehabilitate those tanks, then the capital costs could be significantly lower for those projects. The next slide. This chart's comparing the city to peers that also receive 100% SFPUC supply. And as you can see, we're below the median. And even when comparing the city's fiscal 2027 projected rate increase, or I should say this is for fiscal year or calendar year 2026. And even when taking into consideration the 10% projected rate increase for 27, the city is still kind of middle of the pack. And that's assuming that other agencies aren't annually raising rates, which based on their multi-year plans that they've published, these other agencies are also raising the rates annually. So we expect to remain in the middle of the pack. And next slide.
So just to go through wastewater collection, we are looking still at fairly large rate increases in the wastewater collection utility. So I want to talk through that a little bit. About $10.70 per month is the rate projection for 2027, the increase. This I want to report that the wastewater collection utility received about $2.7 million in grant revenue from Valley Water in fiscal year 25. We're expecting more grant revenue, up to $12 million over the next several years, and that offset much of the cost increases that we experienced from the wastewater treatment plant. So that's really great news. The CIP and operations reserves, however, remain very low. We need to restore the reserves to within guideline range, and we've started a gradual process to do that, and this plan continues that process. The cash for the utility at the year end 2025 was lower than we forecasted. This utility borrowed $3 million from the fiber fund and must repay that amount during fiscal year 2026 plus interest. So we're looking at whether that is going to be feasible to repay all of that loan or whether we need to extend the loan or take a new loan to keep a positive cash balance. So that's an analysis that we're going to need to do throughout this year. Next slide, please. The drivers for fiscal year 27, about 2 years ago, the council approved a plan to do 5 miles of main replacement, replacing sewer mains in Palo Alto's every other year. So 2.5 years of main replacements every year. And then the balances, the revenues were lower than we expected and costs were higher than we expected, and the reserve was very low. So the council deferred the first of those 5-mile main replacements from fiscal year 26 to fiscal year 28. And now we need to begin saving for that project in 2028. And so that's why one of the main drivers here is to replenish the CIP reserve, the wastewater utility. Next slide. So you can see those, the wastewater utility has been operating at the least possible level of CIP over the last couple of years. And this plan would restore the 5 miles of main replacement beginning in fiscal year 28. Next slide, please. This slide shows the operations reserve being restored over time. It already has been restored at the end of 25 to near $2 million, and we expect it will be within guideline range in 2027 and beyond. Next slide. And then the CIP reserve as well, we're planning to restore that. Again, these 2-year cycles of main replacements will have construction years in 2028 and 2030. That's why you see the balance going down in those years, but it will be within the guideline range by 2030. Next slide. The wastewater bills are lower than average for residential customers and higher than average for non-residential customers. I think that might be our last slide. Next slide, please. And thank you so much. We'd be happy to try to answer any other questions that you may have.
Sorry, Chair. Maybe Alan or Lisa might be able to summarize a little bit of some of the feedback the UAC members gave us as part of that discussion before we got into the committees. I think the dialogue with the UAC was really helpful and aligns with likely thoughts from the committee.
And I'll just add, having Commissioner Gupta here when we had a major UAC recommendation was, I think, a good practice. And I wonder if we might want to do that on a more systematic basis too. Thanks.
Yeah, let me just, that was actually one of the comments and discussions as part of the UAC is how they become more engaged and communicating directly as a UAC, as a group to the finance committee and potentially even the full city council. So they're actually having that as an active discussion on how they should go about that in terms of working as a body and having representation on critical items. So I did want to touch base and thank you, Kylie, in terms of the feedback from the UAC. And I think as staff has mentioned and looking at our costs and our investments, it's very important for us to be in tune and in touch with the community. And affordability is on everyone's mind, and not only in the local level, but also I think at the state level as well. So we are constantly looking at our programs, looking at how we are meeting those objectives and needs per the council policies, and also looking at our reserve policies as well. That's why we spend so much time, frankly, talking about how we kind of can move levers in terms of priority projects. For example, as staff mentioned on the water side, we were looking at seismic retrofit of 2 of our tanks in our foothills, which is very important for not only water supply, for fire protection. What's the best way to go about that? A full replacement or maybe seismic retrofit? What do we need as a utility? So those master planning efforts, that long-term view is something that we look at. The UAC was very interested in looking at that affordability in terms of our priorities, in terms of some of our assumptions that we put into our budgeting process. So there's going to be more engagement as we go through the next several months with the UAC on that as well. So part of that feedback, we assume, will come back, and will come back to this group as well. So there's absolutely active engagement. As staff has mentioned, the projections are very similar from last year. And the feedback from the UAC is that while these increases in totality are larger over those 5 years, we'd like to take a harder look at that. So we're having that active engagement.
Great. And one of the things, did we skip over slides, what I have on the 4 through 7 on the cost containment?
Yes, we skipped through those. We just had one question and went through those very quickly.
I found them really kind of worth dwelling on a bit. And that it's good for us to understand this range of actions. Oh, we're pulling it up. So it's slide 4 that we have up there now. And a number of these, maybe all of them, we've already received as updates on a more piecemeal basis, but this kind of brings it all together as a package. Sorry, I'm skipping down and looking at the slide 5 is the future ones. And are these cost containments that we haven't yet had presented to us? That these future ones, these are kind of a next set. Is that correct? And that'd be
Yes, I believe these. I don't believe these. I'm not sure if some of these were contemplated last year when we brought these to you, but yes, that's the idea, is that these are things that we're actively working on and trying to achieve in the future.
Okay. Colleagues, any other questions? Do we have anybody from the public? Maybe we'll just take care of that.
We do not.
Okay.
Can we go back to slide 5 there? And can you talk about, just go through each of these and just give a quick description? In fact, for example, the savings from the Western transmission, 2 to 5 million, that seems significant. Anyway, is there any more details that you can give to us about these 5?
I can start with the first one. Others might want to chime in on some of the other ones. So for the grid so on the grid modernization, we are looking at trying to look at how much we should finance through revenue versus how much we should finance through debt. What the timing of that must be in terms of when we can, could we push it off a little bit more? That might save costs. So looking at what the optimal.
So you're effectively kind of reducing reserves instead of issuing bonds?
No, just pay as you go to a certain point, and versus, how quickly is our spending actually happening?
Okay.
Yeah. So
if you would slow down the work to try and.
No, I'm just saying the timing of the debt issuance in terms of when we're actually spending the dollars. If our dollars are not going to be spent till a little bit later, we may be able to.
So you look at the work schedule and say, well, where is this?
We don't take on the debt until we need to take on the debt.
Gotcha.
Yes. So optimizing that and looking at that.
Yeah, let me chime in on the second bullet point, which you were talking about. So, as the city, or as the council may be aware, just we receive about 40% of our power from large hydro from Western Area Power Administration. So, with the new laws in effect coming up, we are projecting what they call the extended day ahead market, which is basically a term of us on the Western region is able to project those savings and use that resource. So we are actively working with WAPA on using that federally owned transmission and seeing if there's more value that can be extracted from that. So we have staff dedicated to that in terms of trying to extract more value as they look in entering that market.
And so when you're,
Sorry. Oh, I'm so sorry to interrupt. This is Lena Perkins. Alan, is it okay if I speak to that for the transmission exchange agreement?
Further detail would be great. Thanks, Lena.
Yeah, just this, I mean, I'm Lena Perkins. I am a senior resource planner colleague to Lisa Valier and underneath Alan and Carla. And I just wanted to say that the second bullet is something that, staff has been working towards with the Western Federal Resource since before I came 10 years ago. And we finally were able to pressure the federal Western agency to negotiate a really good deal for customers such as ourselves, as they did a transmission exchange agreement once in 20-year opportunity with PG&E, and so they were able to basically allow us to receive our federal hydropower using the federal transmission system, which is approximately $1 per megawatt hour versus $33 per megawatt hour. So every drop of hydropower that we can move along our share of that federal transmission is saving roughly $32 per megawatt hour. So that's why it's variable between 2 million and 5 million. And that came into effect for the first time ever in May 8th of this year. So we're just starting to see that.
And part of that, so the difference, thank you, Lena, is the CAISO charge. So if we're able to transmit that through the federal power lines, what we call the low voltage TAC is avoided. So that's one of the values and benefits. And Lena is very, she has been instrumental in making that happen and working on behalf of Palo Alto and frankly, the other NCPA members. So she deserves, frankly, a lot of credit for actually making that happen and then tracking and following up with our partners on it. So it's been I would say a partnership with Western. They are, we are a customer of them, and we work hand in hand to make sure that we can bring that value back to Palo Alto.
You mentioned the day-ahead market. Are we using that to project what kind of demand we have and selling or buying excess demand ahead of time, or so we don't have to hit the spot market, or what's the?
Yeah, so with the new, this is kind of a generational, and I'll actually ask Lena to expand on it because it's in her absolute wheelhouse, and she'll interrupt me again. So it's really important for us to look at our portfolio and how power is actually moved. Basically, what has happened is with the governor signing this extended day-ahead market, it opens more opportunity for us as a state to sell more of our excess solar to the other states, and opens it up for us to get other, frankly, power from other areas, and that helps, I think, both in state and out of state. But I will leave it to Lena to go through more details. But I just wanted to give you that 2,000-foot overview. 20,000.
Yeah, no, and I would just second what Alan said and say that's also, we've been working with Western to optimize our hydro dispatch to time, this really new market with very low prices in the middle of the day. And so there's constant, we've gotten pretty far in that, given where we started 10 years ago. And there are some expanded opportunities with the new day-ahead market coming, but that'll be on next year's slide when we have something really great to show you. It's kind of in the ongoing and some new opportunities. But this transmission exchange agreement was really hard fought. So that's the 2 to 5 million a year for this year.
So for the day-ahead market, are we generally going to be buyers or sellers, or are we playing both sides?
We're both sides. Yeah, because that's the benefit of the market is that, when we optimize our dispatchable resources, so hydro right now, and then battery coming to the highest price hours, which are also the highest carbon emitting hours. And so we put those clean resources into those highest price hours, and then we, make more money with the same resource rather than following our load. and keeping all the clean resources to ourselves and forcing other dirtier generators to run to serve other folks' load.
Okay, so for example, we have the solar cells down in Southern California. We'll look at the weather pattern and see, do we expect a lot of power, and we'll try and sell that? Is that the issue?
Yeah, luckily they have a whole excuse me, I'm getting over pneumonia. Otherwise I would be there. But luckily they have a whole market that clears on an hourly basis, kind of a day and a half ahead. That's the day ahead market. And so we can, look at those prices. And then it also runs on a 15-minute basis and then a 5-minute basis. And so, we generally, most energy is transacted, like 90% is transacted in that hourly market, which is the day ahead. And so, that takes into account both the type of energy and the transmission constraints. That's what the ISO market does. So if it's a whole bunch of energy in the middle of the desert where there's no load, the prices are low. And especially, a whole bunch of solar energy that you can't, that without storage. So the prices are very, very low. So excuse me. But yeah, so that's the beauty of the market, is it's optimizing, on this. There's maybe like 1,000 nodal points on the ISO market, and each point and each generator gets its own price. And that's projected in the day ahead.
Okay.
And yeah.
Okay, thank you. That was useful. Can we go to slide 10? I had a question about the percentages. This was showing the budget and also the change in rates from year to year. And on one of the years, it said 35% change in rates. Was that a typo? On 2023?
No, there was a year that we had very poor hydro conditions and put into place the hydro rate adjuster. And then when we took that hydro rate adjuster out, we did an increase in the base rate of a similar amount. So that's what happened there.
Okay. And then we got a whole bunch of rain and bailed us out.
Correct.
And so then in 2025, it says -6% to 9%. What does that mean?
That year was a cost of service study year, and that was an attempt to show the range of bill impacts to different categories of customers based on that cost of service study.
Okay. And so if we look, for example, we during COVID, we kept the rates flat. If we just looked at the last, let's say 7 years there, what is our average rate increase? If you average out altogether, do you know that?
If we hadn't artificially restrained our rates during COVID, is that basically?
Yeah, that's
I
basically.
will have to calculate that. I only know that for across all the utilities is 6%, but I don't know that for 6% per year, but I don't know it for the electric utility. Let me try to calculate.
You don't have to calculate it. I was just wondering if you knew off the top of your head. Okay, can we go to slide 14, please? Question about Santa Clara. I know that they're not totally green, right? And are there other differences?
Alan, would you know anything about
We have another former Santa Clara employee here in the background. So, but I will try to address that. So these are the median residential. Again, Santa Clara is a different animal because of their large data centers, and their commercial industrial areas. They have a large area of the city that had a lot of areas that had industrial, like for example, Intel used to have a fab there. So they had a lot of manufacturing. So when that left the valley, they had all of these available spaces, and the data centers came in there. So they already had that embed infrastructure. They're also very active in CPA. They're very active in geothermal. They're very active in wind. So I don't want to call out them as anything negative. They do have different investments in different portfolios. So they're able to pass some of those savings to their customers. So it is of a different animal. So for example, 95% of their load is non-residential. And a big part of that is their large data centers. And I believe that's 50%. This is public information, so I'm not sharing anything outside of what has already been conveyed to their community and showing that value and what that means in terms of, tax revenues and everything else. However, that said, it's a very different animal from what we have here. Our peak load is around 170. Their peak load is going to be projected in the next 5 to 7 years about 1,200 to 1,300. So they're much larger. They're the largest public-owned utility in CAISO.
Are there any strategies that you'd like to implement from them?
So, I think there's opportunities in Palo Alto, but Palo Alto is also unique in the services it provides. It provides a lot of employee-based services and the ability to expand and provide power to those customers that need it. If they need on-prem data centers to have their data centers local, we have that ability with our grid modernization, with our new second transmission corridor that will bring us additional capacity to meet not only the growth from electrification, but also customer growth as the city sees fit. So we talk to many customers that want to be in Palo Alto, but we see that our sweet spot different from other agencies. We don't need to copy them, but we need to be aware of what they're doing. And we have active collaboration with Santa Clara, with Roseville, with other public-owned utilities as part of NCPA, and we've actually expanded our collaboration with Southern California cities that also have public-owned utilities. So we actively share that information because we're all cities that are serving our communities.
Okay, thank you. Can we go to slide 28? And that's talking now about Foster City there. Is it just because Foster City is newer and they have new pipes that have less maintenance, or what's the difference between Foster City and us?
I don't know the exact answer to that question. I would assume the age of the system has something to do with it. But, they are exposed to their own challenges and risks. I did take a look at Foster City since it is so much lower than peers, and they are, I believe, their 5-year rate plan reflects 5% rate increases. And so they still remain, far below other agencies. But something to consider is that their wastewater rates are significantly higher. They look to be about twice as high as Palo Alto. So if you look at a combined bill basis, it's comparable to Palo Alto.
Yeah. Interesting. Okay. And then finally, on slide 30, we talk about a $3 million loan from fiber. Is that common that we loan money back and forth between the different funds?
No, it's not common, but we did follow the same process that has been done in the past, I believe, with the airport fund. And so this is a formally written up loan agreement with an interest rate, and but it isn't common. It was because of certain factors that came up in this particular instance, in this utility.
I would think that if one fund has excess money and one fund needs money, that's better to loan it between each other as opposed to going to an external funding source.
Yeah, we need to be paying our costs with each utility, so it's not something that we would plan to do for that reason. But at the time, it was a better option, less costly than going to some sort of outside source to borrow funds. Yes.
And we can, same with the general fund, we can borrow or lend money to the general fund?
From enterprise funds?
Yeah.
Not common practice.
Is that frowned upon, or is it just that you just don't want to mingle?
I think with Prop 218 and fee settings and everything, it's best. So it's not a common practice in municipalities.
Okay, thank you. That's all I have.
Just a few things. The proliferation of data centers, we're not going to be a major location, but a lot of firms have to co-locate certain data centers with their operations. So have we projected what we think will be both the demand and how that would affect our supply and rates?
Lisa, I could take that if that's amenable to you and Alan.
I was about to throw it to your way because I know you're waiting.
And now you know I'm lurking. So yes, I will say that we have and that these rates include some data center growth, although not much. I think it's what is public about our data center load growth is what is in our IRP projections for, we had a number of scenarios there for high, medium, and low, and also how large of a potential customer Tesla could be with the public arrangement there, the public-private partnership there. I will say that, we saw fairly robust growth over the last 12 months, and that's, this projection is 8% higher than last year's projection for electric load. But currently the city gate load is fairly flat for a few months, and so these lumpy additions, there's a lot of question marks about how much data center loads will come here beyond the commitments.
I'm just wondering, and it sounds like we don't have adequate clarity on this, but how much between our electrification and the data center growth, how much additional supply are we going to have need for? And will the cost of that new supply, if it is solar plus storage, be below the average of our current supply?
I think there's two questions wrapped there. It's not just a supply question. It's also, how expensive are the customers to serve? And so I will just say that for large commercial data centers, if they have very high load factors, so the ratio of average to peak loads, then they are generally, they make very good customers. You sell a lot of electricity per investment in wires to serve them. And, ideally with grid modernization, you get an overall higher load factor from the residential and commercial side for electricity as well. So that's the revenue side of that. And then from the supply side, we expect new supplies to be more expensive than our current supplies.
Let me just chime in a little bit here. So what a higher load factor means is it's basically those customers take the power at a steady rate. So you don't have to have and build your system out for that peakier load. So that's where data centers are really favorable. So they have that nice, constant, steady load. It's easier for you to make those projections, and there's a commitment typically by these data centers to build in your jurisdiction, and then fill the buildings with servers. So I think that's part of that equation. As Lena was mentioning, the IRP, that's our integrated resource plan. That's a longer term projection, and we do the high, medium, low scenarios to ensure that we are looking at those new resources that we need. And as you may recall, we provided an update in the trolley battery storage project in terms of what resources we need. And there was a gap in the future as the RPS or resource, as the renewable portfolio standards are increasing over time, right? So they're going up to 60% by 2030. Why are the costs going up? We are seeing that as more agencies are looking for these renewable contracts, there's more competition. And, with the recent changes in the administration in terms of the tax incentives going away, so, we are seeing what that market is giving us.
So are we seeing, because of the overall increase in demand, in part because of data centers, that increase in demand is starting to outstrip what was the planned supply in renewables, primarily solar plus storage. And it's just driving up the pricing somewhat. Is that?
I wouldn't say that's it's there's many factors, unfortunately, and I hate to say that because it just sounds like I'm dodging the question, and I apologize for that.
Right. Yeah, and I'm not saying it's the only factor, but I will say that back in, I'm trying to think of what years, maybe, I don't know if it was in the 2011 or 12, we were seeing an increase, significant increase over several years in cost of renewables. And it wasn't because the underlying cost of producing renewables was going up as much as that we were caught in the period when the state had mandated a 20% renewable portfolio, and we were trying to fulfill our 33 at the same time. And the market was just, demand was exceeding supply. And then within a couple of years, it really reversed itself, and the cost of those renewables went down drastically. And I'm just trying to get a feel for whether we're in one of those periods and, trying to anticipate at what point in time will that imbalance of supply and demand get worse or get better? And I don't know whether we have any tentative answers to that.
Well, what I can tell you is that, as we mentioned when we brought the trolley battery storage project to council, that we are going to work with Northern California Power Agency and do another RFP to look at new resources, somewhat smaller in scale and larger in scale, to see what deals we can achieve in working with our partners. And that's that scale and working with the city of Roseville, Santa Clara, Reading, Lodi, others, as you saw in that trolley battery storage project, gets us kind of that economy of scale. So we know we're going and testing out the market very soon. So, and seeing what's out there.
Well, and that project seemed to indicate a trend that seems logical, that we have a lot of solar in the state, and now we're having more storage kind of catch up with that solar capacity to some degree, and that the cost of solar, the cost of solar is not dropping at the rate of the cost of storage. So to what extent does it start making, for a period of time, the better investment in storage than additional solar?
I think those are very good questions. The crystal ball is not so clear on that. I think as we go through this budget process and looking at preliminary rates, we having those active discussions and looking at those projections, and we'll bring that back. I know the UAC is very interested in getting some of that preliminary look. So, we're going to try to provide information that is publicly available.
Okay. And then we had this drop in gas sales last year. To what extent, we have electrification, but I wonder, what have we attributed to? And one of the things that I had observed was that we had a winter of exceptionally warm nighttime temperature. And was that a significant factor that we've identified?
Yes, I think that's a really good point, that, the gas usage is primarily driven by weather, and in 2025, that probably was a primary driver. When we did our forecast, we did weather adjust it and looked at regression and taking all those different types of variables into consideration. So, it may change in the future. We'll keep evaluating it each year.
Yeah, we tend to look at the daytime temperatures in a winter, but it was an undertold story that it was a winter of maybe 5 degrees above normal nighttime.
It was also very mild summer too. So we didn't have a lot of the AC load. We didn't see a lot of that. So it kind of kept prices down. We also had a very good hydro year. So we were able to keep some more storage in our reservoirs. So, there's a lot of factors that go into it. So that's why I didn't want to try to oversimplify it, but you're hitting all those points.
Okay. And then last thing is just our lessons learned from when we went through COVID, and, it was a rare event. But there were policy decisions to try to basically keep our rates close to flat. And I think in hindsight, we probably overcompensated there out of good intentions, but it comes back to bite you when you have to catch up, and we depleted our reserves as much as we did. So I just want to make sure we've codified our lessons learned for the next crisis. Yeah. Okay. So we don't have any action on this, correct?
No action is required.
All right. Well, thank you very much. No other questions or comments, right? Okay. Thank you. And that takes us to our last item, which is a status update on calendar year 2025 Finance Committee referrals.
Hi, Chair and Committee. There's no presentation on the item or slides before you. In the packet is a brief update on the different referrals. And most of them are closed with a few open, and we indicate in the report when they'll come back to the committee. So with that, I wanted to turn it over to the Chair and Committee to see if you had any questions.
Chair Burt, may I just say for the record, we do not have any requests to speak on item 4.
That would be a great Halloween week prank. Start calling in public comment on things that should happen. Thank you guys. I know you've had a really long afternoon.
Thank you.